a little background on me. I minored in child development. My career started off in nonprofit space, working with teenagers, so middle school, high school, and so child development, some child psychology in there, um, and that's kind of the limit of my expertise. I'm not an expert. I don't do seminars on parenting. So, but that's my background. So I have a little bit of credibility in this space. But the rest is just my anecdotal experience. I look at raising kids in 3 phases. One is birth through 4 years old. The other one is 4 years old through about the time they develop that empathy. So they start to get a frontal lobe that's starting to function and they can put themselves in other shoes. This is usually early teens. For some girls, it might be even earlier because their brain matures faster. Some boys might be a little later, like freshman, sophomore year of high school. So
mine's still developing.
And then the third phase is what I call adult practice, And so you just need to know what the main objective is in each of those phases, because parents put way too much pressure on themselves in terms of what they do and how that affects the outcome for their kids. And the first one most get wrong is birth through 4 years old. And that is your main objective in that time frame is to make sure your kid is kind. And the measurables for that are, do kids around their age like them? Do they get along? And do adults like them? That's it. Like, you're not trying to, your kid, it's, teach my kid to read and all this sort of stuff. Like, cool, but that's not as important as your kid being socially grounded and being kind and being able to get along with people. And here's why. And why, parents, you don't matter as much as you think you do after 4 years old. After 4 years old, and I'll link some studies here in the show notes, after 4 years old, give or take, about 80% of your child's social development now happens outside the home, away from parents. So you only have about a 20% impact on your kids' social skills. And we can all agree that's the most important thing. Everything comes after that. Whatever your goals are for your kids' intelligence, whatever your goals are for your kids', athletics, whatever your goals or objectives or frameworks are, if you have religious paradigms that you're trying to shape into your kids' life, those all need to come after them getting along with everybody, right? And here's why. Especially with adults. And this is where I think a lot of parents kind of trip up a little bit. If your kid annoys adults around them that aren't you, they're going to get bad energy from adults, right? I've been around those kids where I'm like, hey, where the adult kind of lets them run wild. Boys will be boys, that kind of thing. Lets them run wild. And it's like, I have to give your kid negative energy just to protect my own sanity, right? It does take a village, but the village has to like your kid, right? So just kindness, and that part really came to being when my wife and I were like I can't remember what it was, some kind of class or something. Maybe it was prenatal, that thing where they're like, what do you want for your boy? And it was boy specific. I remember the question, and everybody goes around the room. I want my kid to be strong, and I want him to be masculine, and I want him to be smart. And my wife's like, I just want my kid to be kind. And it's true. All that stuff can come after that. If you want your kid to be smart, you want your kid to be athletic, you want your kid to be masculine, feminine, whatever, that all comes after kindness. That's your goal. That's simple. Your kid needs to be liked by people, and you need to like your kid. If you can do that, everything is going to come after that. Yes, there's kind of the 5 paradigms of things that we'll talk about in phase 2. So that's phase 1, 0 to 4. You need a kind kid that people like. Phase 2 is the development of a sense of empathy, which happens somewhere in there, and in that time, you're also trying to figure out what your kid is kind of good at and learn how to kind of water that and let it grow. So if your kid tends to lean into arts, water that, let it grow. If your kid seems to like sports, lean into that and water it, let it grow. If your kid is into, reading, education, intelligent things, water that and let it grow. But in that, your objective is to get them to understand this power they're starting to develop, which is to be empathetic and to understand other people and understand how they might view them and how they think, so they can just be connected to their fellow humans on this earth. And if you can do that, the adjustment period, because there's going to come a point, you've had kids, John, that are, you probably remember one day all of a sudden your kid now really cares about their appearance.
Yes.
Right now, all of a sudden, they are showering every day. They are spending time in front of the mirror. They
picking out their own styles of clothes.
They are fighting with you about the clothes you're buying them. That's because what's happened in their brain is they've gone from, I kind of think about other people, to this shift to, not only can I think about other people when they're around me and how they might feel in the moment, when they're not around me, my mind can put myself in their shoes. And now I'm thinking, oh crap, they're thinking about me now too. So now I'm worried about what the kids might think about me when I show up at school. So that I start to care. So you're preparing for that, because that's a violent shift. And it is very challenging for a lot of kids, depending on the substrate. But if they have a good foundation of, you have a kid that people like, they're getting good energy, they have some things that they are passionate about or getting good at, and you're helping them with that. So they kind of have an anchor of identity. And then when they get into this space where, oh crap, people are thinking about me, even though they're probably not, they can handle that, because it's a violent shift. And if that's not going well, a lot of things start to fall apart. Grades collapse, behavior becomes a problem. They start to give up on things they used to like, or get into things that maybe might be harmful. So it's very important to get that right. So first phase, 0 to 4, kind kid. Second phase, adapted and ready for the mind fuck of, everybody's thinking about me all the time, even though they're not. It's challenge. So that's the third one. And the last one is adult practice. Like, how, start to test what your kid could handle in terms of chores, in terms of taking care of themselves, making decisions, right? And that's really the big one. So yeah, you can, like, some families have a lot of structure, like these are your chores and those sorts of things. And that's all great. Whatever the framework you want to use, what matters is, can your kid think critically and make decisions that are good decisions? And so if they're liked and they understand people, that's the kind of the main framework for making good decisions. How does this affect me? How does this affect others? So and then I can start to think forward. So better to have them learn how to make the decision to do the things that need to be done, like homework or chores, than just establish a rigor around it, because now they're just being robotic about it. So, and all of that is wrapped in two things. One is kind of the 5 areas of responsibility you have as a parent. Most people would say, well, I food, shelter, clothing, everyone agrees there. Like, I need to keep my kid alive and protect it from the elements. And then everyone would say, well, I also owe them love. And right, that gets you most of the way there. The last one is trust. And I think this one is the first one to get thrown out by parents, especially as they move into teenage years. And if you've messed up early on, people don't like them, they're getting bad energy, you start to have a kid that's a more challenge as you move into phase 2, which is empathy. And then phase 3, adult practice, is just, off the rails if the first 2 are messed up. And so the trust becomes an issue. But trust your kid. So if they're making good decisions, it's easier to trust them. So if you've trained them or mentored them to make good decisions, then you're on your way. So it's really that simple. I need a kid who's kind. At 4 years old, do people like my kid? As they move into teenage years, do they have a healthy understanding of where they fit in society within their frame? Do they understand their empathy and are they able to wield it safely? And third phase, can they make decisions? Can they make critical decisions? Because at the end of the day, you're not going to be there. And the last thing I'll say is this: discipline. One of the last resorts in discipline. You can have all your structure you want. You have different paradigms, whether it's just whether it's religious based or just how you view the world, however you want to discipline your kid, all that, whatever. One of the last tools of discipline is prohibition, banning something, not allowing something. Better to, and one example is music, because that was core to me, and I have a lot of trauma from that. Did your mom throw away your tapes?
My youth pastor convinced me to take them around back and break them by the dumpster.
My mom barged into our room and threw away a stack of tapes at least twice that I can remember. Banning things. What that does is, the danger there, music is core to my being, right? Music is an important part of who I am. And now you're banning something that makes me who I am, that is a part of building Vince. And you've banned it. Now you've broken the trust, Mom. I now have to hide all sorts of things from you. And once I start hiding little things, am I going to start hiding big things from you? Right. And the reason for this is, look forward, and you're moving into these years where your kids have more freedom, autonomy, they're driving, transportation. Can they make the decisions? Mm-hmm. The decision you really want them to make, and this is what it all comes down to. If you've done all this right, when something goes horribly wrong for your kid, somebody gets pregnant, someone gets arrested for drunk driving, car accident, those sorts of things, whatever you want to think, who do you want them to call first? You want them to call you. Mm-hmm. Do they trust you? Do they know? Do they believe that no matter what it is, you will always start on their side, and you will always give them a hug? And that's what I want my kids to know as we move into adult practice: is no matter how bad it is, I need you to trust me, and I need to make sure I set a substrate so that you trust me, so that when everything goes sideways, you can call me because I'm on your team. As a father. It might be different for women. I can only speak from a dude's point of view. My son will likely will rarely encounter another man on this planet who wants him to do better than them at everything. Right? I want my son and my daughter to do everything better and have a better life than I did in every dynamic possible. And that's rare. And so I want them to know that. So that's kind of that's my parenting one. You're starting off. People have to like your kid.
Yeah.
Do what it takes to like your kid so they get good energy from the world. Everything else can come after that.
Man, that's really good. That's really good, man. There's so much there. My mind was racing all over the place. One of the first things when you're sharing is like, dude, you were there when 3 of my 4 kids were born. And like, I remember I've had pictures of you holding them, for the first time. And I remember one of the first Vince lessons I received is, it may have been our second, maybe Tyler, you came over and we had like child-proof the house. And we had like pads everywhere on the corners of things and like little gates with switches and, cut a tennis ball and put them on the ends of the knobs. And you're like, what is all this? Like, what are you doing? Like, you're not entering their world. They're entering your world. So like, take the pads off. And like, at the time I didn't quite get it, and now I'm so much so the same way. Like when I go to other people's houses and I see all the money and all the effort and all the time to build their world in a padded, safe, clean environment, it triggers that response within me that I remember, with you. And then I also remember there were
that's
a lot
a good
of
one.
times...
I want to jump on that one real quick because there's a paradigm to that I learned early on when we were living in Hawaii. We're just starting. I'm a year into my career after college, not making much money, but wife and I are like, we think we want to have kids. And a mentor of mine was like, you're never going to be ready to have kids. If you want kids, have the kids. And what I learned very quickly is for the first really 4 years, your kids are not much of a burden financially. I think that's really overblown. Unless you are super dependent on a dual income and you're maximizing, you're basically spending all your money, where we weren't dependent on a dual income. My wife kind of worked part-time. I had a full-time career. She was kind of working full-time, kind of working part-time, but it wasn't like, we're dependent on it. So a few years of her, she didn't really work until my youngest was in kindergarten, but it came down, you're never going to be ready. And the other component of that is, like you said, is they're entering your world. You're not shutting your life down and then crafting a world for your kids.
Yeah.
This is your life. This is who you are. Continue to be that.
Yeah.
Unless there's something grossly wrong, you have some addiction or something. Yes. Cut that out of your life. Yeah. But if you like your life and you're a good person, invite your kid into your life. And that trickles down into everything. Like you said, the safety thing. I remember distinctly having a conversation with somebody who had a kid who was just like a few months younger than AJ at the time. And I think AJ was around a year and a half. And she's climbing on like a little wall that's maybe a foot off of some grass. Right. And the other kid was starting to climb too. And as that parent got up, I can't remember if the husband or wife, I kind of stopped and I said, wait. I'm okay if AJ falls off of that.
Yeah.
Right? Like, she's going to learn more falling a foot onto some grass than if I go there and rescue her before it even happens.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's just part of it. Like, your kids have to learn to navigate the world. And that goes forward to the other one. Like, and this is very controversial, what I'm going to say now. I've never used filters on our internet to block websites, because eventually, and probably sooner than you are comfortable with, your kid is going to have access to the actual internet, and they're not going to know how to navigate it. Right. So better to train your kid. Hey, Dad, I saw something I didn't think was right, and tell me about it, versus, creating a fake reality for them.
Exactly. So when you were sharing that story about AJ on that little well, it took me to the same conversation you had with me, kind of stepping into that next phase, which as you were sharing that next phase, so much of my mindset, like that middle one, is just kind of that socialization, which, you defined really deeper toward empathy, developing that empathy. Like, there were several times, when we're hanging in the driveway or in the cul-de-sac in our neighborhood where we had our folding chairs, we're hanging out, and I was the first dad to get up, and you were conditioning me, like, you put your hand on my leg and be like, dude, sit down. Like, they're going to work it out. Like, just watch, see. And like, by helicoptering like that, I was diminishing my kid's ability to allow for that environment through the socialization.
I wouldn't say you were helicoptering, and I'm going to expose you for a minute. And I think this is it because I love you and trust you. But you were in a phase that a lot of dads of boys, when they're first born, are boys, they love playing with their kids. And they become, there was a point where maybe you were too much of your kid's homie. So then when it was time to hang out with the adults and the kids were around, your kids were trained to try to include you in everything. So you and I are sitting over there just trying to relax, talk adult stuff, and the kids are playing. And your sons kept rolling up, hey, Dad, check this out, or Dad, throw me this, or Dad, catch. Which is cool. Like, that's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, but you have to teach them to be aware of the context of and so one thing my wife did, I didn't understand it, was when the kids were little, and I don't know if this was how it worked, but almost every day she required, once they were out of a certain age, she required them to play in their room by themselves for an hour and entertain yourself. Play with your Legos, play with your dollhouse. I don't know if that had anything to do with it, but
no, that's good right there. Independent playtime. Like, like go spend some time with self. I just, I kind of wish I would have caught that. Because in my mind, looking back, what I caught from it was let the socialization unfold and allow for your children to fit in that environment, as opposed to trying to control that environment to help your kid fit, when you're handicapping their ability to be able to do that within the environment, so to speak.
Right.
And
adapt.
And that's
you got to
what
adapt to what's happening.
That's what I got out of that. Because here's the truth, man. When you said that just now, I'm thinking, I don't think I've grown through that. Like, I'm still too much of my kids' homies. And I hate saying that in some ways, because I know as a parent, like, there's a lot of not good stuff with that. And it's hard to be honest and like look inward. Like, we went to my kids' basketball games last night, and I think I said bye to 30 basketball players and 3 parents.
Yeah.
I was high-fiving the dudes, talking to them about their games, and like,
well, I think that's just because you're like me, where like I don't tend to get along or with people my age, just because I like to play and have fun, and people my age in their 40s just kind of given up on having fun.
Yeah. So, okay. So that was one of my first thoughts, and even added to like the environment thing, like, it's crazy to see parents with 1 or 2 young children, because it just like takes me to a place of like, man, that's like vacation for me. Cause like, I have 4 kids, but to see them, like, when it's time to put their kid down, all the lights go off. You got to start talking at a whisper. We're going to put the little sound music thing on with the little LED soft glowing lights, and we're going to swaddle, and we're going to set the environment. And then, okay, can't talk. Don't let that door shut. If the dog barks, we're kicking it in the throat. Like, I can relate to that with,
right.
My youngest, but then people help me see that, like, okay, no, put your kid in the middle of the living room, turn the vacuum on, let the music play. Like, it totally shaped the way my kids sleep anyways now. Like, my kids can sleep in the environments. We don't have to, because sleep time is such a huge thing for parents.
Yeah, I think they called it like a sleep prop. So if you had all these triggers that your kid needed to go to sleep, it would be tough to break those. So then when you're traveling or you're just across town at grandma's house, the kid won't sleep, because they're dependent on the very exact,
right.
And that's details of parenting.
Yeah, sure,
but that really comes down to the same thing. The one paradigm that covers all that is they're coming into your world.
Mm-hmm.
Teach them how to exist in your world.
When you were sharing middle phase into that kind of that third phase, like one of the things that I was thinking through with how I'm just doing what I'm doing for right or for wrong as a parent, just, in these crunch years is, I put a lot of emphasis in, and I'm filtering it with what you were saying with empathy, around like that. You were talking about the needs, and I think it's similar to like the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And and for whatever reason, I've kind of adopted to or latched onto, and I'm not claiming to be right or any kind of expert, but what I've observed is like this need for self-actualization, where I feel like it's just almost just dangerous for kids in the way that we parent, but also within those environments where like kids get punished for being who they are, so to speak.
Right.
And then you begin to lose yourself to fit in a way where it's safe, and you're neglecting these things that are the very, fiber of who you are, where then you collect these hurts. And then you get to the other side of it by the time you're a teenager. Really, I feel like I see it more in young adulthood, where it's almost like a reset button of self to do this work of healing and reconciliation and forgiveness, whether it's parents, siblings, to that next layer, extended family, to that next layer of friends, to that next layer of acquaintances, but really within this environment of public schooling, where it is what it is. But in that, it's almost like there's these like prison type rules, so to speak, where you got to operate and behave a certain way to be safe, where you're not being put front and center, where who you are is being made a target for, bullying or people's expense. Then it's like you're scared to be yourself, and these environments trigger these things to keep you from being yourself. And so like when I think of my kids as a parent, everything you said, yes, like as you were talking, I'm like, that's really good. That as a parent, I want my kids to be who they are and give of themselves and dial in on these passions, and as opposed to just kind of going through our culture where you get to the point of, man, what is my life? Like, what is this for? What's this worth? Like, will I ever be happy? Because you're so far removed from your true self that you're lacking this self-actualization of, no, I am who I am. I'm proud of who I am. Like, my greatest gift is me to those around me. And really that's going to unfold like my purposes and maybe my career or how I can be happy. And so that to me was what was going through my mind as you were sharing these things. And I can see how, if you're not liked, if you're already behind the 8 ball, how much more work that creates and how much more separated you are from yourself. And those labels go with you, and you believe them, you adopt to them, those integrate into who you are. And it's so hard that I think that at the very beginning of this conversation, you're talking about our need for therapy and our need to work through these things. And I think that that's a huge part of our life, is the work that's before us that we need to individually be doing, however that looks. And I think at the beginning of the year, that's how we do these, resolutions, is we realize I got to work on myself, and so anyways, those were a couple of the things that were just like totally going through my mind as you were sharing, and where I'm at with my kids.
No, you're at the exciting time, because you start to really recognize where you it seems you did well and where you may have gotten behind a little bit. Is your kid making good decisions, and do they have confidence in themselves in the right context? So again, that really comes down to that first thing. Teach them to live in the world as it actually is. And that's a big part of it. And that comes down to, there's going to be context in which you're in your space. It's your time, it's your bag, whether that's sports, whether that's social environments, whether, arts. Like, that's why I think it's important during that second phase is to figure out what your kid is good at and water that and help it grow, because that is going to be their center of self-confidence. I'm good at something, and that's important, or I'm passionate about something that I want to be good at. That gives them an anchor and identity, so try all sorts of things out. Make sure you expose your kids, sports, arts, social contexts, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Very cool. So I hope that helps for all the soon to be moms and dads out there. I love talking about it because, again, it was my passion. It's kind of how I started my career.